it was an era where that's where most people got most of their news, and news wasn't instantaneous. News came out every day. There were maybe 7 editions of the news, 12 editions of the Post, a few editions of the Times. But all of this, the cycle and the compression that we live with, it wasn't there. And news was distributed from one place out to everyone, as opposed to the way we also get it now, which is we curate our own news. We're, in a sense, our own editors, which has some pluses and has some minuses.
Joining us now on Open Book is Richard Esposito. He's a 5-time Emmy Award-winning investigative journalist. He's also the former NYPD deputy commissioner. So there's a lot to unpack there, as well as the book, Richard. But the title of the book is Jimmy Breslin, The Man Who Told the Truth. And what a fascinating book. And I just want to frame this for you, Richard, before we start the interview. I was 13 when Son of Sam was prowling New York. And of course, you remember those very famous daily news composites. And of course, Jimmy Breslin was on the beat. I don't think there was a person that could read in New York that wasn't reading Jimmy Breslin. So I just want to set the scene. I was young at the time, but it was a riveting part of our lives. But it's great to have you here. What a career you've had. So I want to start with that. Tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us who you are, if you don't mind, because I think we're both fellow Italian Americans. Tell me a little bit about your grandparents, if you don't mind, if you remember them.
Sure, I think I remember them. Yeah, so I was born up in East Harlem, Pleasant Avenue, which was an Italian American neighborhood, and my mother's family had come over from Italy in the late 1920s. My grandfather basically jumped ship and became a laborer in New York, and my father's father was a plumber, and so that's where I started. I grew up in that neighborhood and went to school in Manhattan, went to high school at Fordham Prep in the Bronx, went to NYU. So as you can tell, I wasn't allowed to go anywhere that you couldn't get to by subway.
Yeah, the Italians
mother,
don't even let you go to summer camp, Richard. You know, there were only
no,
the Jews go to summer camp. You know that,
my,
right? The Italians are not allowed to go.
my mother said you can go to Columbia, NYU, Fordham, or any place in Queens, and that's it.
Right.
So
Right.
I was like, okay, well, that's my choices. So that's my my childhood in Manhattan. It was Manhattan was a different place, big as it was, and I thought I was going to teach. I went out to graduate school at Berkeley, but then I was able to get a job as a copy boy, which is just what it sounds like. You took people's words, their copy, and ran them back and forth. You also shined shoes, bought cigarettes, got people beer so they could get through the day at the Daily News. And some people go to journalism school, and the old system of being an apprentice, where they paid you to learn, which was kind of neat. So that's my beginnings in journalism. I spent 4.5 years at the News. I became a reporter there, and I came just 6 months after Jimmy Breslin got there. I got there as like a 22-year-old clerk, and so that's the beginning of my introduction to him and working. My starting job in journalism was the largest tabloid in the United States. They had.
So I want to go there, if you don't mind, because I have a lot of younger viewers and listeners to this podcast, and they're used to the internet and they're used to reels on Instagram or TikTok. But when we were growing up and when you were rising in your profession, we had the tabloids. And so what was packed inside the tabloids, the sports section, top stories. They could have been national stories, but also stories that were important to New York City. There was a gossip column. There was even a horoscope. There were cartoons. I mean, this was the end all be all. And I can just say to you, and I think you'll appreciate this, my father had the Daily News delivered every day. I would go out to the front of the house and I'd get it out of its plastic wrapper, and I would sit down and I would eat a bowl and maybe even a box of Captain Crunch cereal or a box of Lucky Charms. I'd start from the back, Richard, because that's where the sports section was, and I would go and I would read it backwards like I was a Talmudic scholar, right?
Yeah.
I would read the whole thing. And so tell us about that time in New York when the daily news was read by everybody. And the legendary Bill Gallo, the sports cartoonist. Tell us a little bit about the whole thing.
It's in a sense, the book is like, it's a book about a bygone era. When I started, you would go into the Daily News, and if you touched the railing, you got covered with ink. There were these huge presses spitting out 1 million or more copies of paper a day. And as a clerk, you would take bundles of those papers from the composing room, bring them upstairs. And the subways, which, as you know, now are filled with all of us looking at our iPhones, and were filled with people reading tabloids. And the reason for the tabloid was, one, a lot of pictures for working class people who, when the news began, might have had an 8th grade education. 2, very short stories, simple punctuation, quick to read. And 3, you could open it in a crowded subway car. You didn't need elbow room to, like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. So you could hear it almost, people opening and turning the pages. You would read from the back, I would read from the front, somebody else would read the cartoons or the horoscope. And that's how newspapers were sold on newsstands. If you went to a newsstand in New York when we were young, some papers were front page up for people who wanted to buy whatever was on the front page, and other papers were back page up for people who cared about what was really important, whether the Yankees won or the Mets lost. And that's how news dealers would sell them. So it was an era where that's where most people got most of their news. And news wasn't instantaneous. News came out every day. There were maybe 7 editions of the News, 12 editions of the Post, a few editions of the Times. But all of this, the cycle and the compression that we live with, it wasn't there. And news was distributed from one place out to everyone, as opposed to the way we also get it now, which is we curate our own news. We're, in a sense, our own editors, which has some pluses and has some minuses.
So I guess where I want to go, though, is the feeling. Because there was a feeling. I don't know how to describe this to you. Paul Castellano is gunned down in front of Spark Steakhouse in December of 1985. And the picture on the front page of the Daily News is something that is seared into my brain. I'll never forget it the rest of my life. You can't get that from an iPhone,
No.
what we were all experiencing. And so you're on your iPhone, I'm on my iPhone. We may be reading totally different things, and we have totally different algorithms feeding us different information. But every single one of us was reading that paper.
That is, in a sense, something we've lost and we haven't regained in our new media and the way we live. Everybody was reading that paper. So Jimmy Breslin was a voice that over 1 million people bought. That means 3 million people every day would see each other and say, "Hey, Anthony, did you read Breslin's column today on Son of Sam? Oh yeah, I read it. What about you? What do you think? Wow, that was something." There was a common conversation, and that was part of that era. Everyone, if you rode a commuter train in the morning, you'd come into Grand Central Station, you could tell where people worked. Some people would have the Wall Street Journal under their arm. Some people would have the New York Times under their arm. Some people would have the Daily News in their hand. And you could tell where everyone worked. And they all had common conversations with large groups of people. And it's not the same. Even today, the New York Times is algorithm driven. So, it's not for people sitting in a room saying, what are we going to put on the front page today? And that's how those big headlines, Ford to City, drop dead, Son of Sam, turn yourself in to me. That's how that got written. That's sort of the ethos of people having a common journey to work, a common conversation at work, and the knowledge that all day long you would be talking about these things. Something you don't get when you have a hybrid work life, right?
Yeah, no question. And I wanted to set that scene for people to really understand who Jimmy Breslin was. So now, if you and I were Dr. Frankenstein and we were going to make a journalist in a laboratory, it would be Jimmy Breslin. Okay, the guy's born in the city that he loves. He's raised in the city. He gets educated here like you, and he becomes literally the go-to journalist on the beat on so many different stories. And he's a polymath. He reads everything. He's probably the best source journalist of that era as well. And people want to talk to him. Even people that he's lighting up in the paper call him to talk to him. So, in your own words, sir, tell us who Jimmy Breslin is.
Jimmy Breslin was your voice. He didn't speak to you, he spoke with you. And that is what made him unique. He had all those skills you just put together, and he could see the world through your eyes. So if you he understood the problems of a cab driver. His father walked out on his family when he was 10 years old or younger. He understood single mothers. He understood poverty. He lived all of that. And he lived without bills being paid and having, a mom who drank too much. So you had a person who was a brilliant writer. His writing was, in essence, the poetry, like if Yeats was a cabbie. He could write poetry that you would understand, and it was your poetry. He connected with you intimately. So if you're building this Frankenstein, what you had is someone who started at dawn making phone calls, didn't stop until the rest of the world was asleep making phone calls, and sat there all day sweating over every word to be sure you would understand what he thought what was most important to you. And Anthony, he was only talking to Anthony. He wasn't talking to a million people. He connected with you. So that's what made him special.
So let me capture something. Let's tell a story that's in your book that is so Breslin. Okay, he writes a story about the JFK assassination, but he interviews the person that dug the president's grave. So take us through that.
So JFK gets killed. It's perhaps the greatest example of what hate can do in a society, right? A president who was hope and change. Everyone goes to Washington. Every reporter who's anything in the country descends on Washington. And they're all going to be there. They're all going to watch the procession down, Pennsylvania Avenue, the horse-drawn hearse, the horse-drawn coffin down the street. Jimmy wants to show you what it feels like to have a president dead. So he goes to the home of the working man while he's having his breakfast, his ham and eggs in the morning, watches him put on his coveralls, watches him go to dig the grave. He's the only reporter there. And he knows this will give you a window into what the death of a president is really like. A man who's making $3 an hour to dig a hole into which essentially America's hope is put. And that's what Jimmy did. He told this story, and it was a story that also changed how storytelling was done in newspapers. This was not your third person, step back, objective narrative. This puts you there. And when Kennedy is going to be buried, the gravedigger will have to wait, just like you would, to go and see that, because there's no room for the guy who dug the grave at the scene of the great grieving. So it is a classic story and a technique that he used over and over again, but never just as a technique. He always used it to a point. There are many examples of it, and that was just one of the things that made him special. He was in New York when Kennedy was assassinated, and he wrote the next day a story that puts you in the emergency room where Kennedy was being operated on. And you read it. He wasn't there, and yet you were there. He reconstructed it in a way that was phenomenal. And this was very new to the way reporting was being done back in 1963.
So the the feeling for me about him was that he was the center of the city. You know, the politicians, Andrew Cuomo's father, Mario Cuomo, Ed Koch, Abe Beame, John Lindsay. If you picked an American New York Pol, they were talking to Jimmy Breslin. They were part of his web, but also the criminals, Richard. Tell us the story about the Son of Sam and David Berkowitz. And obviously, you reached out to him in prison to get some of his commentary related to this.
Yeah, I mean, the criminals knew that this was the guy who would tell their story too. Berkowitz somehow, this serial killer who gone through, came out in the dark of night with a handgun and killed young women. He decided that the person he wanted to tell his story was Jimmy Breslin. So he wrote him a letter, a really dark letter about the streets of New York, and that he would hope to see Jimmy again, or maybe Jimmy would get to watch the cops blow him away. So that's a serial killer reaching out to him. But on another hand, when Frank Costello, who ran the Lucchese crime family, was retired, and Joe Valachi, a mob rat, was in Washington testifying, Jimmy went to tell the Valachi testifying story by sitting with this retired gangster while he had his last cup of coffee for the night. And Rossetti turns to him and says to Jimmy, I'm not watching these hearings. My agent said I'm not going to get any residuals from the last one, so why should I participate in this one? And he brings you humor in this case of this mob stoolie taking apart the mob by being able to sit with the gangster who trusted him enough to let him in the room and sit down with him. And he did this repeatedly. He was beat up by Gentleman Jimmy Burke, who ran the Lufthansa's heist of $9 million from the airline. He was once beat up by him, but when his wife had cancer, Burke called Jimmy up and said, come over. Jimmy got in a cab, he went over, and Burke said, here's $35,000. Your wife needs, I've known her since she was a girl. So that was his world. He lived and breathed the entirety from Mario Cuomo, who was both his friend and someone he called and tortured every day, to gangsters. I mean, if you asked Andrew Cuomo, the governor's son, also a governor, he would say Jimmy knew that his father and Jimmy had different jobs, and those jobs for each of them came first.
Yeah.
Mine was to govern. Mine was to tell people whether you were governing well or not.
Yeah. And they had great mutuality of respect for each other. I'm going to throw a name at you, Rich. You remember Donald Mannis?
Oh, very well.
Yeah. I mean, Jimmy wrote one incredible story about him. And just for viewers and listeners, Donald Mannis was in charge of many different things, but he was in charge of the parking commission. And he had obviously taken some graft and stolen some money from the parking meters and had them in his socks and all kinds of crazy stuff, and ended up getting caught. And prior to trial, he committed suicide. It was a very painful thing. And Breslin wrote about that. And what I loved about the writing related to that, it was both sides of it. It wasn't just a two-dimensional Donald Mannis. It was some of the things that he did well and how he went astray. And what I loved about Jimmy, at least his writing, I never met him, that's why I was so fascinated by your book, was that he was human. He wrote it from the many facets, from the kaleidoscope of what a human being actually is. Every time you turn the wheel a little bit, you get different colors in somebody's personality. And he wasn't afraid to go there. He wasn't a two-dimensional. So much of the writing today is Richard Esposito good, Anthony Scaramucci bad. Let's turn these people into pancakes and just write about them in this really overbite of stereotype, if you will. He didn't do that. He painted with his typewriter a three-dimensional character. And so why was he able to do that? And I think that's really the title of your book. He's able to tell the truth about things with all of its complexity. Why was he able to do that?
he was, fundamentally, if you think about the people who've written about you and your life and your career, how many of them took the trouble to walk up the steps, knock on your door, walk in the room, and ask you the questions to your face, not at a press conference, just the two of you?
Yes.
And once you do that, once you do that work, you're seeing a person. You're not seeing Donald Manny's borough president who stole money, type, type, type. It's not just a name in a story about corruption. It's a person who you've gone and you've met and you've talked to, and you're able to tell your readers what he ate, where he grew up, who his friends were. One of the things about this particular scandal, and frankly, it's the biggest scandal until the one we've had in New York right now, and where half of the government is again getting subpoenaed, indicted. He knew Donald Manny's, and he knew all of his cronies. And one of the things that upset Breslin about this story was, wait a minute, you guys were stealing all this money from parking meters and I didn't even know? That was the thing that angered him probably the most, is that they pulled it over on him. How dare they, And that's what made him readable. That's why you're laughing, because that's how he wrote it. He wrote it like he had this lawyer, Klein the lawyer. Klein the lawyer was actually a man named Mel Lebetkin, who was deeply involved in this scandal. And that was it. Jimmy couldn't write about Klein the lawyer anymore. He was furious because he lost the character and like the nerve of him. Like Mel, now he was just Mel Lebetkin. So this kind of voice, to make things have richness and dimension, this wonderful ability to be a storyteller, is what he did. So when you read the newspaper day after day or year after year, over that time, in essence, he built a world for you. And if you regularly read that newspaper or the ones he wrote for, you knew his world. So you knew these characters. And even people who didn't like him respected his talent. Even people he went after respected his talent. And that comes from people looking you in the eye, you know?
So there's something about him though too that you write beautifully, that like you say, he is them, he is their voice, but he also, I mean, I'm thinking of the word chaotic. There's something about him that is chaotic. He almost like lived in chaos, as you write about in the book. Describe that. Like who was he? And what was his lifestyle like? Who did he interact with?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't have a lifestyle. That's the thing. He was incapable of. He couldn't drive. He couldn't keep track of his money. If he made $200,000, he spent $201,000. His wife spent the day, rubbing cigarette ash into pieces of paper to fake receipts. His bosses were constantly scraping up money for him. What made him such a compelling person to write about was he was larger than life in all these ways. He lived in complete chaos, and he was born in chaos. His father was like an itinerant piano player in bars who walked out, left his mother with so little money that she had a bicycle from Queens to like where she worked at the welfare office. And he never he almost needed the chaos to write. His first wife, Rosemary, she ran the house. She paid the bills. She told the milkman, we don't have any money. She begged his agent to get him to stop spending more than he had. His second wife, Ronnie Eldridge, who his widow now, Ronnie drove him to the dentist. If he went to the dentist, he would tell you he was having brain surgery. That's how the experience to him was that terrifying. And
I don't know. I mean, it'd be so much of that old school like way of thinking. Before I flip over to the final element of our podcast, I want to ask you about your favorite article. What was your favorite Jimmy Breslin article?
Now that's a tough one. It's a really tough one. But one of the articles that I really loved, we just talked about two of the famous stories of the Kennedy assassination. There's another story that was far less famous. He stayed another day. Everybody else goes home. He stayed another day, and he told the story of what happens with the people in the permanent government in Washington, how a lobbyist calls a press secretary and says, "So look, now that he's now that I'm really sorry for your loss, but now that he's gone, you're still going to have that investigation into my industry." And Kennedy's private secretary, smart enough to know she doesn't even have a day to clear out her desk. There's somebody coming in tomorrow morning to take her typewriter and take her desk. He captured the pettiness of that in a way that when you read it, you're like, so that's what happens when the pageantry is over and everyone goes home. This is a story I otherwise. So, is it my favorite? Today, it's my favorite story. So
Right.
um, that's the way I could put
No,
it to you.
it's elemental to our lives, though, isn't it, Richard?
Yeah.
We're lucky if our grandchildren, some of them remember us, and after that, no one remembers us, and that's it. It just, it's like the way the impressions are on the sand after the tide comes in, you know, uh, you know, uh, listen, our friend Robert Caro writes about the anxiousness of Lyndon Johnson wanting to get into the White House, but not stepping on the young widow, Jackie Kennedy, on the way in, and she knows it. And so she actually goes to live in Averell Harriman's Georgetown townhouse temporarily while she's trying to find her way.
I
It's a,
mean,
it's a, it's a stunning dislocation.
it is, and he captures something about Lyndon Johnson that few people. I mean, he actually, underneath his gruffness, his boisterousness, his bullying, there was a decent human being in many ways in there, and he understood this and he tried to work with it. And one of the things Breslin captures is, in a sense, after the death of Bobby Kennedy, after the death of Malcolm X, after the assassination of Martin Luther King, Lyndon Johnson became the high water mark of the civil rights movement. There was
Yeah.
no tomorrow, in a sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
Well,
that's
it's fascinating. The guy that the Kennedys hated turns out to be the guy that gets their legislative agenda passed.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And knew even as he was passing it that what he was going to be remembered for was being the guy that got us into the Vietnam War.
Amen.
Um,
Amen.
so yeah. So
So, so I mean, listen, it's an unbelievable book. We're at the point in the podcast now where I'm going to read out 5 words that my producer and I have selected, and then you respond to it. It's just sort of I'm going to say the word, you tell me what comes to mind. Say the word investigation. What do you think of?
digging hard and deep.
Okay. What about the word journalism, which is, I think, different than investigation? But tell me what you think of journalism.
I think of it as reporting, going out and getting the facts. That's what journalism is at its best.
Okay.
Reporting what's happening.
All right. So that's a good segue to the third word, truth.
Truth. Truth is what Jimmy was all about. Take the facts, don't lose sight of the facts, but build fact after fact after fact to give someone a sense of what was true. And that is the hardest part of the craft.
But it's also, it's amazing because I don't know how to say this. It's like he pissed everybody off with his writing. I don't know how to explain it. Like, if you were on one side of something, you read something favorable about the other side and you got irritated. You know what I mean? And then he did it the other way, but everybody was forced through it. Like, today, we don't even do that anymore. We go to the television channel that reinforces our view, and all they do is chant our view, or we go to
Yeah.
the other. We don't have that complexity anymore,
No.
and
One of
that's
the
really where the truth is, isn't it, Richard? I think the truth is in that
it, it
complexity.
is it is where the truth. A relative of mine loved Rachel Maddow and said, you work at NBC and you work with her and she is a great reporter. I said, well, no, that's not exactly what she does. No, 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 that is wonderful. I said, no, she's a bishop and you're in her church and she tells you what you believe. And in a sense, that's her silo. She's very good at it and there's a lot of facts,
No,
but
no, no, listen, I respect and admire her, and then there's a Bill O'Reilly bishop too. Obviously I'm not a big believer in a lot of stuff that Bill said, but he worked his ass off and presented a point of view. And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
so. But we've lost the complexity of a Breslin. So let's go to my fourth word. I say, well, it's 2 words: New York.
New York. New York is an amazing place. It's really made of sand, isn't it? I mean, it changes every day, and yet, there's been 8.3 million people living there for decades and decades and decades, and they're always a different 8.3 million people. And a third of them are always people who just got to America. And one of that's what makes New York the kind of place it is. That energy of, and what else can you say about New York? People think of Wall Street, people think of skyscrapers, but what New York is all of those people and all of those lives, and that's what makes it. There are very few cities like that. Maybe Hong Kong is a city like that, or London perhaps, but New York is just a dream. It's a place where people for generations have wanted to be.
Well, I have a love affair. I have an undying, unconditional love affair for New York. It's the place of my grandparents. They left Italy to come here. None of them had any money. All they had was a dream. This is the American Dream Factory. This is perhaps the most aspirational city in history. If you go back through history and you think about the rise of people in New York and the openness and the willingness to accept different types of people, it's an emerging market. If you look at the different people that are arriving here, and it's probably still the most cosmopolitan city in the world. Okay, my last two words, and then I'll let you go. I really do appreciate your time today, Richard.
Thank you.
Jimmy Breslin. How would you sum him up? Jimmy Breslin.
Jimmy Breslin. He was the man who told the truth. Jimmy Breslin was a larger than life person who you couldn't make up. And he was, in the words of one of his first editors, also a miserable human being, a great reporter, a talented guy, and he was always miserable.
Well, for me, I admired him from afar. Never met him. Read almost every one of his articles, and I got there after getting through Dick Young. Do you remember Dick Young?
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
remember him before he became when he was still a sports writer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, remember, if you're a Met fan, the worst day in our history was June 15th, 1977. And him and M. Donald Grant are the two enemies of that story. That's when Tom Seaver was traded to the Cincinnati Reds. So it was quite a crew, of people at the Daily News at that time. I really appreciate you coming on with us today. The title of the book is Jimmy Breslin, The Man Who Told the Truth. It's written by Richard Esposito. And Richard, thank you so much for joining us on Open Book today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
I so identify with you because you pulled yourself out of the soup, but you did get this help, right? And sometimes we have to acknowledge this stuff, right? We get so much help from so many different people in life, and you write beautifully about the help that you got. So joining us now on Open Book, and this is someone I was really looking forward to interviewing, is Vernon Turner. He's a former professional football player and now an author with a mission to change lives. And he's written a fascinating book. The title of the book is Beyond the Limits, Finding My Purpose. Vernon, I read this book very quickly, and I saw myself in the book. I saw my kids in the book. I see America in this book, by the way, because this is such an aspirational book. And so, but before we get into the book, who is, for my viewers and listeners, our viewers and listeners, who is Vernon Turner?
Wow, that is such a broad, loaded question because Vernon Turner, I'm hoping, I'm working towards being someone that has acknowledged everything that came upon him, that learned from everything that he's gone through. And I want to leave a legacy that, people can say, you know what, that's a pretty good guy. He's a good dude. And I got three kids. I got three amazing kids, Ashley, Darius, and Liam. and they're my world. And I'm be honest with you, if it weren't for them, I don't know if I would even be here today. It's um, I just want to be remembered as someone who gave it everything he had and everything that he did.
All right, but it was a rough start for Vernon Turner, right? I mean, you write about it. Okay, you get yourself, you're basically raising yourself. And what am I getting wrong about Vernon Turner? You're shooting in the dark about your life. You're an incredibly talented athlete. You're also an autodidact. You're teaching yourself what to do. So you're literally mentoring yourself, you're self parenting. It comes with its highs and lows, right? Because you've got to exaggerate your self confidence to boost yourself up. And then there's also moments of despair. And you write very beautifully about how you react to all these things in life. But you're here. I mean, one of the things about your book that you graced me with your book because of its authenticity. When I read the book, I was like, all right, this is a real dude. This is a guy that's bleeding. You were bleeding on some of those pages. And so, how does somebody that is bleeding, what is the self talk? What is the thought process to get them to pull themselves together and to live the best version of themselves?
I have to circle back to almost to the beginning. Had I not lived this life, Mooch, I wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't believe it if I didn't live it myself.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at a person that was born and raised in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
Started off with myself and my little brother living in my grandmother's house with a crap load of cousins. My grandmother was the grand poobah of grandmoms, man. She was like she had 10 kids and raised them herself. I mean, she was a badass. She really was. And I think I got my strength from her because I
Mm-hmm.
rarely saw my mom at that time, 6.5, 7 years old. She was always out. And and that's another amazing woman that it breaks my heart to even just think about all the things that she went through. But I have so much more love and respect for her now than ever before. But going what she went through back then, um, you know, it was funny because she would go out and she would leave for a few days and come back and she would greet. I would run to the door and she would bypass me and go to my younger brother. And it got to a point to where it was like I used to hide when she would come home so I wouldn't experience that. So it all started there as far as that self-reflection. And as years went
Mm-hmm.
on, when I found out, how I came into this world, it just made it even that much worse. And I felt like trash. My mom was assaulted when she was 18 years old by three guys, and I'm the result of that. And she told me what happened to her. And prior to that, um, I thought my mom really just didn't care for me or something was up. I knew something was way off. But when she told me that, um, the first thing that came to my mind was, man, I'm garbage. God dang it, I'm garbage. And I would not even look at myself in the mirror, Mooch. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. And for years, that was me. I was braiding hair, cooking dinners, changing diapers at age 9 because my mom was still wigged off on the drugs. Now, this story, I'm skipping around, but this story is it's a head scratcher because my mom was not only doing drugs, she was out there prostituting out in the streets. That's why she was out all those nights doing what she was doing. And she meets this guy, this Italian white dude from Staten Island, New York, man. And this cat fell in love with my mom. I mean, I wouldn't believe it if I didn't live this damn thing, man. He falls in love with this lady, a prostitute of a different race with 2 kids, moves moves her into his home in Staten Island, which that's a completely different story, and with her 2 kids. And me, prior to us leaving, I was in my head, I was told that, hey, this is not good. You're going into an all-white neighborhood. They're going to try to, if they can kill you and get away with it, they would. I mean, because back then in the 70s, it was pretty bad, man. The race, the racial tension. So in my head, I thought this cat was bad. I thought he was a bad guy. And Mooch, I was so wrong about that guy. That is my hero. That is a guy that had unconditional love. I had to write a segment in the book about
Hmm.
this dude that he just
Hmm.
unconditionally loved this woman, and he did
Hmm.
everything he could to help her. And from there, I just, again, I was wondering, like, why did my mom keep me? Because she had an opportunity to leave me and my brother with my grandmother. She had a
Hmm.
chance. She
Hmm.
said, no, they're coming with me. They're coming with me. And it took me decades to figure out this whole dynamic of my family and what my mom went through and what my dad went through and my mental psyche, because there were times, and I'm gonna skip around, age 15, my mom passes away because I wished her dead. I thought I murdered my mother, man. 72 hours.
No, you're
I
right.
Yeah.
No, you're right about it. I mean, you're right about your self responsibility, which thankfully you mentally adjusted to disclaim. Thankfully, um, you know, I got to say this to you because you and I are born on the same day. Did you know that you're born on the
Well,
6th of January,
I was going
right?
to mention that.
1960.
I was going to
Okay,
mention that.
right,
Yes.
and so you're my birthday brother. Okay, and I was having a great time on my birthday until Trump stole my birthday. Okay, he also stole your birthday, right? Because he's
Yeah. Yeah.
insurrects the Capitol on
Yeah.
the 6th of January, which is your and my birthday.
Yeah.
And when I think about my life, okay, and I think about the tribulations that I've had in my life or whatever the difficulties that I've had, what's gotten me through is forgiveness. Particularly someday you and I are going to have a beer, and I'll tell you about the way I grew up, and I'll tell you about some of the trials and tribulations, and I'll tell you about some of the drug addiction in my family and some of the issues that my parents had, etc. And I so identify with you because you pulled yourself out of the soup, you know, but you did get this help, right? And we don't. Sometimes we have to acknowledge this stuff, right? We get so much help from so many different people in life, and you write beautifully about the help that you got. But I wanna say this to you, and I want you to respond to it. Okay, Jackie Robinson, who's one of my heroes. If you go into my office, you'll see I've got a picture of Jackie and I've got a picture of Muhammad Ali, two of my heroes, in my office. And why are they my heroes? Because they didn't give a shit. You understand what I mean? They
Yeah.
did not give a shit. They were like, okay, I'm going to do this. And what did Jackie say? That your life really doesn't have that much meaning until you're in the process of serving others. It's one of the best lines
Wow.
ever. And I tell
Yeah.
people, if you're depressed or you're unhappy, go help somebody. Okay, lift a kid out of poverty, or
Yeah.
go, to a soup kitchen, or find a family member that's not doing well and see if you can help them out. Respond to that. Am I right about that?
No, you're absolutely right, because the whole purpose of me writing that second book, Beyond the Limits, Finding My Purpose, because for so long I didn't have a purpose here in my heart. I didn't have a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That's how come
Mm-hmm.
it came it came close so many times, Mooch, that I would take myself out, by
Mm-hmm.
prescription pills, because I did not see that purpose. Why in the hell did the big guy keep me on this damn earth? Why did my mom make the decision to keep me? Why did, I mean, all of these things, it's funny. I gotta pivot a little bit because of something I just said just now, just this second. I have countless inbox messages asking me all sorts of questions about my journey after the National Football League released that documentary on me.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions that they asked was chilling to me. And it was such an easy answer for me. And that was, oh, so I have to ask you, Mr. Turner, you're pro-life, right? You're pro-life. And I stared at it, the question, and I had to reply. And my reply was, no, I am pro-choice. I am pro-choice. And I replied, and they replied almost immediately. And I didn't elaborate. How could you say that by the way you came into this world? I said, precisely. I said, imagine. I said, let me let you know my thought process. Imagine if my mom, she was brutally raped by three scumbags. Imagine if she was forced to keep me and she didn't want me. She was forced to keep me. Okay. Now, how do you think I would have turned out? She was forced to keep me. Even if I was even if I was put up for adoption, what are the chances of me going into a good family or going into a family that was solid? I said, so my thing is that my mom was strong enough to make that decision on her own to keep me. And that was one of the things that I thought about that made me, I think all the time, man. I think especially now more than ever, and my purpose I found out is that I had this story, this unbelievable story, this unbelievable journey of mine that I'm finally getting the courage to share. I am so vulnerable. I am so weak sometimes that, but it's not about me. It's never been about me. It's about why I'm on this earth. And this is to share and help share my story with as many people as I can and to help as many people as I can.
Mhm.
I self-published my book. I did that for a couple of reasons, but mainly because I had to make sure that my family was okay with what
Mhm.
I'm putting out there because there's a
Mhm.
lot of stuff that my family were not aware of that I wrote in that book. And I
Mhm.
made 5 copies on both books and I sent it to my family. And if they weren't okay with what was in that book, I wasn't going to publish. So I needed that control. And number two, it was not about the monetary gain of it for me. I could have sold my rights. I could have done it all. I could have done all of that stuff. But I needed that control. That was the main source of me doing the way I did it. The beyond the limits, finding my purpose. Mooch, I had to push beyond what I thought my limits were to find my purpose, if that makes any sense to you. I had
Mhm.
to, it's like, um, I had no business playing in the National Football League. I was not that good of a football player. I wasn't. It was the circumstances that were placed before me that if I did not pull that off, Mooch, my brothers and sisters were going to foster care. So anyone who came up against me, if they weren't willing and ready to die on the field, it was a wrap, dude. I had them because I
Mhm.
was ready to
Mhm.
die. And I didn't
No,
tell
I
this to anybody.
understand.
I didn't tell
Listen,
this
no,
to anybody.
I've watched films of you, okay, and I get the intensity, I get the killer instincts that you have. I have to ask you this question, okay? I hope you don't mind. Why'd you seek me out? And this is one of the beauties of social media. We talk about the harangue of social media and the negativity. We're going to get into negativity and how to channel it in a second, but you reached out to me on social
Yes.
media. I'm going to tell you, I actually knew who you were, okay, because of the documentary and some other things, and so I responded very quickly. And then you sent me a copy of the book, and then I read the book. I'm like, I told my producer, we got to get you on the show. But why? Why'd you reach out to me?
Well, Mooch, my circle is extremely small because I I can't do BS. I'm pretty my tact is challenging. I'm a straight shooter. Um, I'm a believer of common sense. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm a common sense cat. Anyone that represents us, they need to make common sense. They need to have morals. They need to have values, empathy, compassion, understanding, trust, integrity. You got to have those components. And there's some of the things that's going on in this country today. I, 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 you know where I'm going. So I
Hmm.
saw you. It was when you were attached to 45, and
Hmm.
you did an interview, and you were a condescending, arrogant bastard as far as I was concerned, and I did not like you at all. So some time goes on, and you detached, and I don't know what day it was, but you were on CNN, and you did an interview, and dude, I'm telling you, your your transparency, your ownership, your your authenticity in regards to you being real on what you were saying. I sat there and watched that whole damn thing from start to finish, man. I said, all right, dude, you got me. You got me. So I immediately I went on Twitter and I sent you a message, and I think I told you, like, I didn't like you. And,
No, you
but
told me that. Yeah,
I
I usually enjoy the people that dislike me the most, actually, because I learn from the people that dislike me the most. No, no, no. Hey, listen, I grew up in an Italian family. There were racists in my family. I'm not going to bullshit you, okay? Because there's racism in our society.
yeah,
We're roughly the same age. I got lucky. Why did I get lucky? Because there was a housing project in the area that I grew up in, and there were a lot of African American kids that I grew up with. And so it was very natural for me. I didn't really see their color. Look, I'm not saying that everybody in my
right,
family was like that. Okay, there were racists in my family. I'm not.
right,
Who's going to bullshit you? Okay. And my uncle, who ran a motorcycle shop, his partner was an African American Vietnam veteran who I adored. Okay, I love the guy, and so for me, I'm a product of my environment, right? Like, so when
right,
I left law school, I joined the National Mentoring Program, and I took a black kid from the Bronx who basically couldn't read. Okay, he was
yeah,
13 years old. Okay, he wanted to choke the people in the public school system in New York. I got him some tutors. I got him some money. I paid for his education to go to a private Catholic school,
damn,
taught him how to read, kicked his ass. Okay, there was one day, you'll love this story. I'm in my Honda Civics. I had no money, but I'm paying for this kid's tuition, and his grades suck, and I'm ready to choke him. And then there's a guy coming over to we're on Fordham Road in the Bronx. Okay, and I'm Italian,
yeah,
so I don't
yeah,
give a shit, right? So
I
I'm on
got you.
Fordham Road in the Bronx, and the guy's coming over to squeegee my thing. I got out of the car. I took the seatbelt off, got out of the car. I said, "Get the fuck away from my car." Okay. And I said, "You get the fuck out of it." Then I looked at Errol. I said, "If I ever see you do something like that, I'm going to choke you. Okay. You're going to get yourself a real job, and you're going to fortify yourself with self esteem and a real experience." So Mr. Errol is now 44. Okay. And he's, living in Hudson Yards, and he runs like all the security for these buildings down there. He's got three beautiful kids. Okay. And he's one of my bros. He's one of my people. You understand what I'm
Yeah,
saying? And so when I got the message from you, and you were starting some shit with me, which of course I enjoy, and then I'm reading, I said, I got to read this guy's book. Okay. And that's where it's at, Vernon.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's where it's at. Okay. That's where it's at. So you could see me as a cracker, okay, or as an arrogant prick, okay, because of the impression, but I may not be that. You follow me? And I think that's everybody in America right now. Okay. Let's dial it down. Let's meet each other where we
Right,
live, and let's get to know each other better. And guess what? We're going to find out. We have way less differences than
yeah.
impressed upon in social media or impressed upon in the networks. Do I have that
Well,
right, Vernon? Or
well,
what
well,
am I? What
Mooch,
do I got wrong?
you know, you're right. And the thing of it is that I owed you that reach out because of how I felt inside. I owed you that because I felt one way about you. And then seeing a different side of you and seeing a new, just this latest new side,
Well, no,
it
but I got it
completely,
wrong.
I did a 180.
But I got it wrong. Trump. Look, people be pissed me. I don't give you. He's a racist, man. I'm just letting you know. You could like Trump or dislike Trump. I'm just telling you he is. Okay.
I'm trying to be nice on this thing when it comes to number 45. I really am. And I'm going to continue to do that. I know where I am and where I stand as far as that whole thing. Um, and it's because I have
He's
friend, I
Bernie.
have,
Bernie's a bad dude. I don't even know why these black guys are voting for him. I'm like, all right, guys, you don't even
Dude,
understand you don't even understand what the hell's going on. And I got it because he's a great manipulator. He's a great salesman, but he's not a healing guy. Okay. Healing people love people. Healing people bring people together. Healing people don't try to divide and conquer. You understand what I'm saying? The country's imperfect, Vernon. The country's imperfect. But what did Lincoln say about the country? Okay. It's an imperfect union, but it's up to us to make it more
yes,
perfect. It's up to us to make it better. What did King say? Right? We got to judge ourselves by the character, not the skin color, right?
yeah,
There's no king without Jackie.
no,
There's no king without Jackie. And what did Branch Rickey say to Jackie? I need you to be strong. He goes, you mean me to be strong? You mean to fight these racists on the field? He goes, no, I need you to be stronger than that. To not fight the racists on the
tonight
field.
fight, yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And that's one of
Right?
the movies that I have on my DVR that I watch all the time. And the thing of it is that
I tried to produce that movie. I bought the rights to opening day. Jackie's one of my heroes, and I met with Rachel Robinson, okay, who's going to be 102 years old this year, this July, and she told me I was too white to make that movie, and I was upset at the time,
yeah,
okay, and that was maybe 10, 12 years ago, and so she said, I'm not going to make the movie with you too white, and I said, okay. I was upset at the time, and then I met with a couple of my buddies who were black, and we had the conversation. I said, Rachel's probably right. I probably am too white because I haven't been in the world from the prism of what Jackie actually saw and what Jackie had to actually deal with. But anyway, I didn't produce the movie. The movie turned out phenomenal, and it was she loved it, which is more important than everything else. But that's where we're at, Vernon. That's where we're at. And that's why I wanted to bring you on. And I'm grateful for you for coming on. And I'm grateful there's an unconditionality of spirit in your personality. And you got to drive like I've never seen. I mean, like if I'm having a bad day, I got to think about what would Vernon Turner do in terms of what's going on in my day, because of some of the things you've experienced. So,
well, I tell you, Mooch, again, if I didn't live it, I wouldn't believe it myself, the things that I went through. And here's the crazy part, and you had already mentioned it, I couldn't do any of that stuff by myself. Just keeping it real. I had to have my army of angels. I had to have my Pop Warner League football coach, Bill Thatcher. I had to have my high school football coach, Fred Oliveri. I had to have my college football coach, Ken Sparks, and Dennis Webb. And I had to have these cats. I had to have the Sam Weiss of Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the George Stewarts and the Marv Levy's. I mean, all in the heck, Frank Gans with the Detroit Lions. I mean, I had to have these cats to be the person that I'm now am today in regards to never quitting and pushing beyond those limits that you think those limits are for you. And again, that was one of the reasons why that I got inspired to write the second book. The first book was my autobiography, The Next Level of Game I had to play. I just had a whole lot of crap inside I had to get out. I just had to get out that I never shared with anybody. And once I did that, then I had to take it up another notch. And I don't consider myself a very astute individual. I'm a street guy. Okay. I learn on the go. Pretty much everything that I've done, I've learned on the go. I learned how to enunciate most words on the go. Again, I
no, I get
struggled.
it.
I struggled reading when I was in school. I used to be embarrassed to read out loud in school. So I've come across a lot of barriers, and I have so many lessons learned. That's the reason why I am sharing it the way I'm sharing it. And to be a part of your podcast, now your circle, man, it means a lot to me, man, because I have the utmost respect for you, my brother. I really do. And
Well,
I
I
think you're
appreciate it.
doing it.
It's sweetie. The feeling is mutual. All right, so we're at the point in the podcast where I call it the 5 famous words. Okay, we dug through your book. We have 5 words, and you're going to give me a word back, okay, or a sentence. I'm going to say something to you. First thing that comes to Vernon Turner's mind, I want you to give me. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
I'm going to say I say the word family. What do you say?
Strength.
Okay, I say the word resilience.
My mom.
Okay. That's a great line. When I hear the word resilience, I hear, you get, I don't know what it is. Conditioning. You got to be in it. I say the word extraordinary, which you represent. What does that mean to you?
Extraordinary. You have to. Okay, I'm gonna tell you one of my quotes. I am not afraid of failing, but
Right.
I am absolutely
Amen.
terrified of not trying.
Right. Amen. I love that. Okay, I say the word relentless. All you got to do is watch you in the NFL. But what do you say when I say relentless? What do you say?
No, regardless of the circumstances, I'm never gonna quit ever, um, no matter what, no matter the obstacles. I'm never gonna quit, and I've been like that all my life, and that's the reason why
It's
I'm
hard. It's hard.
yeah.
It's hard. It's having a strong heart. All right. What about the two words Vernon Turner? I say Vernon Turner. What do you say?
A work in progress, a um, someone who owes big time, and I want to leave this world with empty pockets. I truly do. I've gotten a lot of tools, a lot of opportunities, a lot of things given to me, and I want to give it back. And I want to have empty pockets when I get with my mom and my dad and my sis and my grandma up there. I want to have empty pockets.
See, when I hear Vernon Turner, I think good soul. That's what I think. All right. So you got to promise me something. You have a new book coming out later this year. You got to come back on my podcast to discuss it. You willing to do that?
Are you kidding me, man? I got to fly back out home to New York to come and chop it up with you, man, face to face.
All right, you got it.
Absolutely.
You come in studio anytime you want, my brother. All right. Well,
Okay.
I appreciate you so much, and I appreciate you coming on. The title of this book is Beyond the Limits: Finding My Purpose. It's by a legendary guy, former professional football player, Vernon Turner. Thank you so much for joining us on Open Book today.
Thanks a lot, Mooch. God bless you, my brother. I
Vernon,
love you, bro.
while we're waiting for this.